Hello and welcome back again at the last panel of the conference. The panel is called On the Fringe of Remembering Street Art as Memoryscape. Due to difficulties in understanding time zones, we may contact Francisca Fernandez Merino a little later, so we will start with Vjeran Pavlaković, an associate professor at the Department of Cultural Studies at the University of Rijeka. He was the lead researcher on the Memoryscapes project as a part of Rijeka's European Capital of Culture in 2020. His current research includes transnational muralization of conflict and a history of Dalmatian immigrants in the American Southwest, about which he will also talk today in his seminar called Sites of Oblivion, Walls of Remembrance, Street Art and the Recovery of Memory in the Arizona Borderlands. Vjeran, welcome.
Can you tell me if there's like 2 minutes left? Or hello. Thank you for inviting me to the conference. I think it's great to be here, and it's actually been great listening to the other presentations today because I do come from a historical background and more academic approach, and it's been great to see practitioners and scholars working as art historians or the visual arts. And most of my background and research has been on sites of memory, commemorations, transitional justice, and so on. And it's only in the last couple of years that I've tried to apply some of these approaches to street art and murals, and also having grown up in Arizona, but not having really worked on U.S. history or Arizona while growing up there, but now I've returned there. So it's also been kind of an interesting opportunity to go back to a little bit of my childhood and revisit some of these actual sites of memory. And so today I'll try to present the beginnings of a project and maybe pose some questions. Hopefully there'll be some feedback. I know there's masses of people out there. I can't see them, but I'm sure there's a lot in the audience, whether these ideas fly or not. So as I mentioned, I've already worked quite a bit on sites of memory, post-conflict situations, and building monuments or memorials, naming streets, or even visual interventions such as street art murals. It's not just about the fact that an event is remembered or commemorated, but it's also in what way? What is the message that's being sent? And I think in terms of historical murals and memory, Northern Ireland is probably the most researched and maybe the most famous. And here's just two examples of, do we want to have a militarized sort of vision of the past, or is there a way to create art and memorial spaces that focus on reconciliation, peace, coming together? Just two examples here. And Mitya yesterday mentioned that I was going to be talking about Southeast Europe and the former Yugoslavia, and in fact I'm not going to be talking about it too much, but I just wanted to set the context for what I've been working on the last decade or so, and this perpetuation of the war and the war narratives in Croatia and other neighboring states has now moved to the walls, and it's an explosion, I would say, of the muralization of war, which again is one of the reasons why I've kind of gotten more interested in this subject. I mean, I'd looked at graffiti and street art just as street art, but now really seeing the political messages, the divisions, the perpetuation of war narratives, but also the potential to have, as I said, some reconciliation. So here's just a particularly, I guess we could almost say kitschy, mural in Split recently. And we see this maybe even monumentalization of memorials or murals, because it's not only that they're showing and depicting things such as the Battle of Vukovar, which is very common throughout Croatia, but they're actually being blessed by priests. So these are becoming authentic sacred sites, just as a monument is. We can see a priest there blessing this mural. And what is the message that's being sent to the next generation? I mean, in fact, working with youth, and it's 30 years now after the war, the homeland war, as it's called in Croatia, or the war of Yugoslav dissolution. Here's another example from a town near Split, and children are walking by these murals all the time, showing very graphic scenes of the conflict, which certainly did happen. But is this the proper way to tell the past? And an even more problematic phenomenon that's been going on recently is, some war scenes are commemorating certain battles, but it's actual war criminals, individuals who've been found guilty in the International Tribunal for the Former Yugoslavia or other courts, and now they're showing up on walls throughout the region. So here's just a sampling, and you can kind of see on this is from Karlovac, Mihailo Hrastov actually was attacked by paint. So there are actually real battles over it, and this is, of course, Mitya mentioned this yesterday, the Mladic mural. But there are also some cases of positive examples, and here's another one from Split, which is on the Anti-Fascist Struggle Day a couple days ago, or about a week ago. They held their commemoration in front of a mural to this anti-fascist woman who was killed during the Second World War. And just some theory looking at sites of memory. It's important that they're created, they're perpetuated by the people that attend there. There's commemorations, and when they go, they also sometimes these sites of memory disappear. As I said, I've mostly looked at monuments and monument spaces, and I think in Slovenia the legacy of the Second World War and the partisan struggle has generally been maintained, whereas in Croatia a lot were destroyed, and other places they've been sort of neglected. And that's why I think it's interesting to these murals. They're being blessed. They have these messages. They're functioning as sites of memory, but in many ways, graffiti and murals are sort of ephemeral. But let's now go to the Southwest, which will be the main focus of my talk. Is this street art? I don't know what these the Hopi Indians were doing here, several hundred years ago. Maybe they were also telling stories or depicting various battles, but there's a really long history in Arizona, and it's also quite fascinating. History that has been in many ways erased. So that's sort of the topic of my talk, is this oblivion. In the U.S. there's the myth of expansion, going all the way from one coast to the other, erasing what happened, what used to be there. I mean, there's also other kinds of European colonialism, and then the U.S. expansion, manifest destiny, the romanticism of the past of the Wild West. But there were, of course, many Native American tribes that were living there, and they had their own borders. And then this idea of the Borderlands Project, which is not just Arizona but other states in the Southwest, also known as Sun Belt. There's a big move starting, I think, in the 60s and 70s of a lot of people leaving areas such as New York, Pennsylvania, Ohio, the Rust Belt, and coming to the Southwest. So it's really expanded in terms of population, and this is not a conflict in the dissolution of the Yugoslav wars kind of sense, but a long-term conflict, the devastation of the environment, things that I think we forget about in this rush for being modern and progressive. Everything is moving to the future. So here's just an example of the beautiful saguaro forests, which are then devastated by massive open pit mining, the copper mines that have devastated the environment. Other resources such as water, which are clearly limited, and the more people come there, the less water there is, and agricultural pollution. And there's also, of course, the actual border. I mean, we're talking about peripheries, street art on the periphery. This is an actual periphery, so we have a massive, giant border. You've probably heard about Trump's claims of building the bigger border. This is Nogales. There's also the devastating human loss of migrants crossing and dying in the desert. And just an example, because I am working on these Dalmatian immigrants, and you can maybe see here Ivankovic Company. This is one of the buildings that they built at the turn of the century, and in fact, a lot of these Croatian or Dalmatian immigrants built the downtown, which is all basically now erased. I mean, this photo is pretty much the same spot, and you don't really have any traces. It's all been paved over. urban renewal, building glass, steel, asphalt, concrete. The past of Tucson is gone, and it's not even just the Native Americans and the indigenous peoples or the Hispanic culture, but it's even culture from 100 years ago. And how do we remember this? Well, as I said, Arizona has this constructed this image of itself as the Wild West, whether it's a place like Tombstone where they recreate these cowboys, or some memorials and this pioneering spirit. So the pioneers, the white pioneers came, and then they civilized this wild, rough land and exploiting all of its resources. Lately, there have been some monuments to also pioneering women, which is, on one hand, a step in the right direction, recognizing their role, but it also then ignores, or maybe diminishes the role of some other indigenous women. So, I mean, one example of critical theory was that, okay, this monument does also have an indigenous woman there, but she's sort of looking sadly to the past, where the pioneer women are looking to the future and providing the Arizona future. Another monument that tries to capture the past, there used to be a lively historic neighborhood here, the Barrio Viejo, and was paved over for the convention center. So there is a monument here kind of thinking about its past. Just, that's a very cool little touch. There's a rattlesnake kind of coming out of the boy's belt, which I thought was a neat issue. And then there's some monuments which have failed. I mean, here's Cesar Chavez, a very famous labor organizer, but they put it next to this used car lot, ugly but honest. So it's, the visuals aren't quite great there. I mean, with this traffic signal, just a bad placement of monuments. So monuments are in many ways limited, in fact, how they can capture the past. I think this one is maybe a little bit better, called The First Sighting. So it's when the colonial Spanish colonists came, they were seen by the natives. So again, now let's go to murals. And can murals, or historical murals and graffiti, can we try to maybe bridge that gap of this erased past and try to capture this, maybe the longue durée, this conflict which doesn't have necessarily battles, but it's the taking over of territory, the destruction of the environment. I mean, we came up a little bit, is graffiti vandalism? Well, growing up in Tucson in the 90s, graffiti for us was always associated with gang violence, and it was huge efforts to erase graffiti. I mean, there was constant, here's just some examples from newspapers and like locals, but they're also recognizing that there's a long tradition of mural making, especially in the Hispanic world, and I think it was mentioned in the film about Mexico City, especially after the Mexican Revolution. And slowly Tucson began realizing, okay, actually we can use the heritage and these mural techniques to fight gang graffiti, but also to respect and capture cultural heritage of the Hispanic community, and maybe even going farther in the past. And so now to the central point of my argument and my pitch, does this work? And I'm part of a project, it's called Slow Memory, where we have 4 years to figure out what it actually means. But I think for me, slow memory was, how do we try to capture, again, this longer process, not just maybe like a battle or a general or a war criminal, but a much longer process, and the everyday life that is forgotten, like the nothing, the in-between spaces. So Tucson has built many very interesting murals, and I'll only show you a few ones that are more of the historical sort. So I think this is a great one, because it shows, again, whoops. Well, it showed typical dress, but then of the man in the photo, and then a corner store that was very emblematic of that neighborhood, which was partially destroyed by the highway that goes through there. And actually, some of the Dalmatian characters that we're following also had grocery stores, so I think it'd be kind of cool to remember them as well. But here's another example, is from the Chinese community, which was persecuted and discriminated against for a long time, but were very important. They were actually a connection between a lot of the Anglo merchants, then the Chinese actual stores, and then the Hispanic communities that were then, again, paved over in that earlier image that I showed with the monument. But able to capture that history. And as I mentioned, it's not just the Hispanic legacy, but going way back. And this one is the Tohono O'odham tribe. And they're actually using sort of like the typography and the images from the University of Arizona, which is one of the biggest employers in Tucson. Very important for optics and astrophysics and medicine, but they're very proud of what they've done. But so the native and indigenous people are taking their symbols of this university and using it, that they're still there. So I think this is also a very strong message. And even we saw, I think in New Art yesterday, in the Australia article that you talked about with the chalk drawings and how that's really, really ephemeral. But when I was hiking, this is a famous hiking place, and we see some activists drawing on there, and you're on O'odham land. It also depends on who the artist is. I mean, we talked about not just the content of the graffiti, but who's drawing it. And on one hand, I would say that this is great because it does show that long history of Tucson. It's not just the glittering steel city we have today, but there's a much longer history. But it's this Joe Pagak is the artist, and he does a lot of other things. Should indigenous groups be the ones drawing this, or is this again just exploiting it or not? And just a few more because I'm running out of time, but I think this is another great message. So this is actually from Nogales, which is that border city. And there's a number of other murals there talking about respect for Mexican and Hispanic culture. So I think that the murals and street art do offer, in addition to making the streets look much nicer, and there's a lot of just pure street art, but also sending these important messages which don't always get noticed. And as I said, growing up in Tucson, it was about strip malls and not thinking about the past, really. It was always this capitalist drive and consumerism. But Tucson, I think, is now kind of finding its identity. In other parts, this is from Superior, Arizona, which is a mining city. Occasionally there are some still problematic images. For example, this George Stoneman here, the commander, was covering up a massacre of the indigenous peoples at Camp Grant, the Camp Grant massacre. So still, I mean, it's kind of crazy that this is still being produced in a way. And I guess for the conclusion, what is the potential of murals to capture this slow memory? I mean, is this just cheesy, kitschy murals in parking lots that sort of like token recognition of the past and sort of making this exotic imagery of the past? Or is it really able to tell different stories? I mean, I think from an earlier image in Split where they had sort of a commemoration in front of a mural, I think there are potentials for social activism or making some kind of change with this. And just to give a happier note for the situation in the former Yugoslavia and in Croatia, there are certain mural initiatives that recognize not only anti-fascists and people who are, had fought against war and violence, but also women and important women figures from history. So I think if we can push the street art and the murals in this direction in our region, I think it'll be much better. I mean, I didn't get into the details of like the ultras and some of the things that Mitya was talking about, but certainly it's a big problem with memory murals and the political forces that support them. But we can fight back. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Vieran, and we will continue with Maria Lindma and aka, aka Luis Fernando Alvarez. Maria is postdoctoral researcher at Pompeu Fabra University. I hope I pronounced it correctly. Her current work focuses on the everyday practices of inclusion and exclusion of street markets in Spain. And Aka is an artivist, social leader, urban land rescuer, and gardening expert from Medellin in Colombia. He has been active in organizing and leading grassroots projects that have involved hundreds of young people across Medellin into artivism through gardening, lyric writing, and music making. They will talk of a living gallery, the challenges conserving popular memories amidst urban transformation. And I believe at least Maria is already with us. Hi, Maria. Are we online?
Yes, sorry, my Microsoft. Would you like me to turn the cam already on, the camera?
Yes, please, you can start now. Thank you very much. Okay, yes. We already announced you, so you can begin when you are ready.
Oh, okay, so the time was different. So, I am guessing that I should share my screen. Yes? No? Okay. Just a second. Okay, I hope you see what I am hoping to show you, which is here. Okay, I think I can vaguely see that you are vaguely seeing my my presentation. So I am Maria Lindma. I have a feeling that I'm here alone for the moment, that Aka, my companion, is not with us, or perhaps he's joining us through YouTube. It's slightly early in Colombia, in Medellin, but anyhow, I was going to do all the talking alone because of the linguistic questions, right? So today I will just have make a very brief presentation of the video that I have prepared, which lasts 11 minutes, a bit more. And there I really just want to put protagonism, give the protagonism to Aka, who is one of the leaders of this arts and horticultural project or collective called Agroarte. The title is The Living Gallery, Galería Viva in Spanish, the challenges of conserving popular memories amidst the urban transformation of Medellin. So I thanks to the invitation of Sandy, and when he talked about the event that was going to take place, I felt like it was a good place where to speak of this person of Aka and Agroarte, which is this interesting project that has been going on for almost 2 decades now. And in particular, well, so I will start with a short presentation of Aka, who's a social leader. He's I would call him like a horticultural wise man, and also an artist, a rap artist, who I met 6 years ago when conducting fieldwork for my PhD in Medellin. So the very first time I met him, he asked me to, well, he asked whether I'd like to plant some seeds and some salads and whatnot in the ground. I couldn't say no. And later on, as I got to know him a bit better, it turned out that this was the kind of method or the entry to whoever wanted to get to know him or Agroarte as a project per se. So I believe it's been hundreds of people by now who have, in a way, formed part of these activities. So I was interested in sharing Aka's story in this particular context of street art in the periphery, because in a way, his experiences speak a lot about giving voice to the urban periphery. I will explain the district where he mainly works a bit later, because in particular I've also been fascinated by the way that agroarte has managed to avoid the process of subculturalization. It has managed to avoid being appropriated by the state institutions or other organizations, and in turn it has very successfully managed to spread itself throughout the city in a very fluid way, kind of through rezones, I would say. And this very much talks to Deleuze and Guattari's ideas in rezones, and especially an article published by Vescalaki and Mold in 2013, where they discuss different artistic formations or urban social formations, not as isolated groups at the periphery of mainstream cultural activity as the other, but rather as rezones that are fluid groups that remain scattered, temporary formations that move between different urban sites of expression. And in particular, they say that being rhizomatic allows a nomadic orientation, which invites multiple, ephemeral, and also rhizomatic membership to the city, which allows occasional members to write their own immanent urban stories rather than some observational meta-narrative of capitalism, subculture, or other cultural hegemony. So I like these ideas in particular because I think this conversation between the narratives that are spread about cities is a very central one for agroarte, for this collective that is active in Medellin, which is the city that is in full transformation ever since the beginning of the 2000s, roughly saying. Because the collective grew out of this Comuna 13 district of Medellin, which for decades was the city's most marginalized and also the most peripheralized area. So it was once a self-constructed neighborhood of makeshift houses. But in recent years, it has really become one of the most visited places of Medellin, as it represents the city's miracle or miraculous makeover. And this would actually refer to the sharp decline in the crime rates that was followed by the implementation of social urbanism. And this in particular has gained Medellin several awards for innovative urban development and so on. So this is the main narrative, right? The dominating one. And now what has become particularly popular among tourists is a graffiti tour that goes up to the pronounced hills of Comuna 13. And that is where street paintings can be photographed together with the makeshift houses that are now colorfully dressed up to receive the external visitors' gaze. Now, I've been more interested in sorry, these are some activities that agroarte do, the rap rehearsals. I'll go back here. So I've been more interested in things that are left outside this route. So halfway up to the regeneration corridor where all the graffiti can be seen, you find a peculiar circular-shaped cemetery. And when you glance through its metal gates, you can see several mural paintings on its white walls. And now Aka and his companions in agroarte call it La Galería Viva. So you can see it here again. There's the interior side of it. Which is the living gallery, and this is what we will discuss, or Aka will discuss in more detail during the video. So I will now try to put on the video. Please do let me know if you don't hear the sound or anything. Also, I beg your pardon for the low quality. I am a complete beginner in editing videos. So it should now be on. Okay, you can't hear, right? Okay, so should I change some of the settings? Maybe in here. Okay, just a second, please. Compartir sonido. Okay, I will try. I think I shared the sound now. Let's see again.
Que al frente de donde sembrábamos, nos fuimos a probar Colombia.
Thank you.
Yo hago parte pues, del colectivo, digamos, Agroarte Colombia. He estado en distintos momentos, ¿cierto? No he estado solo en este viaje. En este viaje, pues, mucha gente ha participado, pero un detonante importante fue en el 2002, que al frente de donde sembrábamos, nosotros y nosotras, se hizo una escombrera, un lugar donde desechan hormigón, digamos como las basuras de construcción. Entonces siempre se habla como del milagro de Medellín. Y el milagro de Medellín fue porque fue creciendo en altura el centro, se fueron construyendo las bibliotecas, se fueron construyendo las escuelas, pero en esa destrucción de poder implantar la siguiente ciudad con sus inmetrocables y demás, esa destrucción llevaron volquetadas enteras de hormigón y de escombros hacia la montaña del frente donde nosotros andábamos. Y allí, en este 2002, era la época álgida de la guerra y la violencia en Medellín, en Colombia, la seguridad democrática de un expresidente Álvaro Uribe Vélez y la puesta en escena de la seguridad democrática que en ese mismo territorio donde crecimos sembrando estaba. Sobre el 2002, digamos, tuvimos antes del 2002, desde el 99 al 2002, 2003, tuvimos 33 operaciones militares en la comuna y el lugar, digamos, donde crecimos en la siembra. Y allí a partir de eso estuvieron unas órdenes que se dieron que no podían aparecer muertos en la vía pública, ¿cierto? Porque si ya se hizo estas operaciones dictadas por la presidencia y en combinación con grupos de ultraderecha en los territorios, no podrían aparecer los cuerpos. Y los cuerpos fueron a dar en una de las escombreras, el lugar, digamos, mientras iba creciendo esa Medellín, la violencia y demás, era el lugar para enterrar a estos cuerpos y a estas personas que no querían que aparecieran. Y es una de las grandes fosas comunes que hay actualmente en Antioquia y que quedó al frente de donde nosotros sembrábamos. Allí iniciamos como un proceso de resistencia frente a la escombrera, pero antes de que fuera escombrera, nuestra gran resistencia era porque allá venía el agua. O sea, este lugar, la gente dice, bueno, es una escombrera, pero ¿qué era lo que estábamos defendiendo? Era porque allí venía el agua que nos surtía a la vereda nuestra, a nuestro territorio, pero también la zona de bosque y el lugar donde elevábamos cometas cuando éramos niños, donde nosotros tenemos una frase que decimos recordar la muerte a través de la vida. Y entonces, cuando a nosotros y nosotras, 7 familias nos desplazan de arriba, de donde crecimos, y en el 2014 nos asesinan un niño en Morocho, uno de los niños con los que trabajamos en el territorio y que nos toca que sacar otras familias. Nosotros, digamos, fuimos haciéndole ritual. Aquí hay una configuración que las personas, por lo general, a las personas cuando se mueren les gusta más bien que los cremen, ¿cierto? Que los cremen a que los entierren. Hay 2 poblaciones que normalmente no se pueden aquí cremar o por tradición los adultos dicen yo no quiero que me cremen porque eso es candela y no voy para el infierno. Y los jóvenes, como es la gran mayoría de los que caen en el tema de la violencia por disposiciones legales, solo se puede, no se pueden cremar, solo se pueden enterrar, porque esos 4 años que están enterrados son los 4 años para la investigación. Las investigaciones que no avanzan y terminan en impunidad y que siguen alimentando los círculos de violencia en este país. Entonces, cuando nos asesinan a Morocho, ya voy a hablar del lugar uno, era que nosotros hacíamos el ritual de Morocho, siempre, digamos, los eneros, que él fue asesinado, y entonces fuimos haciendo ritual, ¿cierto? Allí invitábamos a los amigos y amigas, pues como para recordarlo a él, niño de 14 años, y entonces siempre hacíamos algún acto con la familia, invitábamos a otras familias. Entonces, en ese cementerio que queda en la Comuna 13, fuimos entendiendo que había muchos dolores, que no era solo el dolor de Morocho, sino que muchos jóvenes más habían caído. Y allí, digamos, como con la comunidad, empezamos a tomarnos el espacio de cementerio que data de finales del siglo XIX, fue construido cuando no existía la Comuna 13 con sus 140.000 habitantes en el territorio, y tuvo una historia, ¿cierto? Que ahí van pasando, digamos, como los distintos muertos de las distintas generaciones, los muertos por la violencia, los que no, o demás, y fuimos armando y dibujando los rostros de las personas que nos hacían falta, ¿sí? De hijos e hijas que nos hacían falta. Y en algún momento, con la gente, entonces fuimos sembrando para recordar la muerte a través de la vida. Entonces, sobre la fachada, sembrar en honor a esas personas que nos hacían falta o en honor a esos recuerdos, sino como la vida y la cultura. ¿Por qué? Y con esto, digamos, ¿por qué lo del tema de galería? Porque galería debiera, dentro de un cementerio, hablar de los distintos momentos históricos de la comuna, que se están olvidando. En la comuna nosotros estamos teniendo más o menos al mes, con una última cuenta, 80.000, 100.000 visitantes al mes. ¿Cierto? Eso es una cantidad, o sea, es pensar las Ramblas en Barcelona, pues obviamente las Ramblas recibirá y la locura que Gaudí o demás. Aquí es para ir a conocer entonces la comuna que nació del milagro de Medellín. Y entonces hay 700 guías. Y los guías dicen, mire, nosotros queremos contar esta historia, pero entonces cuentan la historia que está en los periódicos. En el 2002, 2 helicópteros Black Hawk disparando con .50 hacia los territorios, 1.000 efectivos del ejército, 500 de la policía, en combinación con el bloque Cacique Nutibara y el bloque Metro, entraron y rodearon a las guerrillas que habían en el territorio y metieron, digamos, toda esta guerra en el espacio y luego dejaron el tema de desaparición forzada. Pero nadie cuenta, ¿cierto? Algunos cuentan, dicen, no, yo soy contador de historias. Algunos dicen que el Che Guevara murió ahí en las escaleras eléctricas. Otros, tomando tinto, dicen que Pablo Escobar se sentaba a tomar tinto en una cafetería ahí que se llama La Última Lágrima, al frente del cementerio. Entonces, los mitos y las leyendas van saliendo, pero entonces todo vuelve al tema de el turista que quiere venir a buscar la transformación de Medellín y que le cuentan historias, ¿cierto? No quieran escuchar que al frente de las escaleras eléctricas y todo este complejo, al frente está la Escombrera, el lugar que es una de las grandes fosas comunes en Antioquia. No, yo no quiero escuchar, yo quiero que me cuenten lo bonito y lo que ha pasado acá. Entonces, Galería Viva se vuelve el versus de decir, venga, no solo vamos a nombrar la guerra, vamos a nombrar la vida cultural también. Vamos a nombrar cosas que hemos venido levantando desde la estrategia de Galería Viva, es levantar las historias, la reportería urbana, el levantamiento de información histórica, ¿cierto? Con unas bases importantes que trata de remover cosas que no se han contado. Entonces, la guerra es un momento de la historia. La guerra es un momentico muy chiquito de la historia, pero la vida derramada en la comuna y a su alrededor es mucho más. La narrativa, y ahorita con la narrativa que, que nos está alojando nuestra directora es la siguiente, ya que somos como ese árbol donde varios y varias vamos abonándolo y sus raíces, digamos, se van extendiendo también como para abrazarse con otros y otras, y adicionalmente sus frutos vuelan, ¿sí? Entonces, si hay un lugar donde un árbol común que todos y todas podamos sembrar y que en últimas sus frutos no nos dejen olvidar por qué iniciamos todo este camino de la búsqueda de los desaparecidos, de acompañar los dolores compartidos, de sembrar plantas que protejan el aire, que protejan las abejas, que no nos permita olvidar ese árbol donde no vuelve. Hay muchas cosas que hemos olvidado. Creo que ese es el foco que por lo menos estamos viajando en este momento, ¿cierto? Que funciona como rizoma, pero que también funciona como flor que viaja pasando las fronteras, ¿cierto? Es como ese camino. Y que también es móvil. Los árboles también caminan. O sea, una ceiba camina, ¿sí? ¿Y cómo camina? Pues con sus semillas, ¿cierto? Una hierba silvestre camina, claro. O sea, obviamente vuela o explota o hay distintas formas, ¿sí? Asimismo, yo creo que debe ser la vida, no es solo unos lugares, sino que la vida también van llevando ese camino.
Okay, I will leave it almost here because I think I'm through my time. I hope that maybe in the discussion time there'll be a space to discuss several ways of how artists allow giving more potential, giving a louder voice to the small people in the peripheries around the corner, to the alternative narratives, urban narratives that I believe are absolutely crucial in order to assure that our cities remain diverse spaces instead of becoming these metropolises maybe where it's just one dominant and hegemonic narratives take over and sort of shut down the voices of the small people, of the lay people, and their memories in particular that are absolutely necessary for also maintaining these urban fights. So thank you for giving me this time. I hope I can keep on being within the conversation. I will stop sharing my screen now. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, yeah, that's because I think I missed the previous conversations because I wasn't there. Just one question, should I take my camera off in order to avoid maybe overlappings or anything, sound issues?
No, it's no problem. You can just mute yourself and we'll put something else on the screen anyway.
Okay, well, I'll take my camera. Thank you so much.
Okay, so it's time for the next presentation. Mathieu, I believe, is already ready. Mathieu Tremblin will be the next one, French artist, researcher, and teacher who implements simple and playful processes of action inspired by anonymous, autonomous, and spontaneous practices and expression in urban space in order to question the systems of legislation, representation, and symbolization of the city. Wow, your bio almost rhymes. He will present facts and effects of pentimento at the age of neo-muralism. And Mato, with his special abilities, already put the presentation on. So, Mathieu, welcome.
Thank you. let me just make a test of the remote. No? Yeah, it's crazy. Yeah, just have to insist. No? No, it's too fast. Too fast? Okay. Oh, it's really annoying. You can also do here. Yeah. Okay, maybe you move them. Okay. Yeah. You can see it. I will do it like this. So, sorry for the position of authority, but I prefer to have a proper slideshow. So yes, my presentation is based on my position of a researcher. I'm a visual artist and I did a PhD in visual art. And this is important to precise because it means the way I am approaching the research is always practice-based. It means that instead of observing a field, I'm always participating in the field, even producing the subject that I'm studying. So this is how it's going to work. I'm going to show you some example, try to draw a frame that brought me to one experimentation, and I will conclude with the experimentation instead of starting with it and then theorizing. You see what I mean? Okay, so the question here I want to raise is something related to what is called in French repeint, like retouching, and it's a term to acknowledge a manner of analyzing the painting and how the author will or somebody else will cover the painting, retouch it for various reasons. Of course, what bring my attention on the topic and make it related to public space is this Cecilia Jimenez retouching, repeint, of a Ecce Homo painting that became a meme, Potato Jesus, in 2012. Of course, because yes, so this is the definition of repeint in French. I'm a bit stupid here. It's nice because it's a French word, you know. So just to say that the repeint can be split in various styles of repeint. I forgot to change the emojis on this page. I'm sorry, but you're gonna have to imagine the other emojis. So repeint de pudeur, modesty retouching in the tradition of painting, it will be like normally, yeah, this is the right one, you know. The point of the repeint will be to cover the genitals of the characters in the painting, so correcting some moral issues of the painting. Then repeint de style retouching will be about updating the painting to the taste of the day or to different beauty canon. So I put the fingers, you know, with nail polish stuff. Normally, it's emoji, it's different. Technical repeint will be this city worker because it's all about restoring the integrity of the paintings that have been damaged. And for example, another repeint, maybe there is some more existing, but actually that's not what I want to talk. So it's just to give you a frame, conceptual frame. Iconographic retouching will be reframing the narrative of a painting. So for example, changing somebody and turning him to a saint. So maybe adding some small, or maybe, yeah, changing the narrative also to fit to a different context. But when it comes to name writing, the notion of repeint, like the fact of coming over a painting and changing something, is kind of the DNA of the practice, because you know this fair use concerning the covering in name writing graffiti. There is this rule that is an evidence, and that's even how the notion of respect is working in graffiti. Is that a tag could be covered by a throw-up, in French we say flop, and then a throw-up can be covered by a piece, in French we say graph, and then of course you can have a graffiti fresco over it. All of this with characters and backgrounds, that's why we have the white and the smiley, and so all this process permits various authors to cover each other, interact, in a fair use of the mural. I won't add the reputation of the writer and the toys thing, but I'm just speaking about the technical part, how the repainting is working, how the retouching, so to say, is proceeding. So, when it comes to retouching, repeint in public space, things tend to be different because if we look at the urban landscapes through the filter of urban intervention, I mean urban graphic intervention, so graffiti, but like name writing, but also writing slogans or doing drawings, whatever, like graphic intervention. What is beautiful in the urban landscape from this lens is that it's a processual beauty, the beauty of the daily micro-transformations that is opposed to the frozen aesthetics of public commission and permanent artwork. Because, yes, if you look at the way contemporary art and public art work is commissioning work, the idea is always that the work is permanent, is forever. So, in France, for example, 90% of the budget of commissioning works, artworks, contemporary artworks in public space is dedicated to the maintenance of the existent artworks. So, if you look through the lens of the graphic intervention, which is very light as an economy of mean, then what is interesting is it's changing all the time. This is what is interesting in graffiti culture, but also in urban intervention and street art, if you want. So, if you look at a spot, at a wall that become a spot, each spot ending as a graffiti mural is shaped by the sum of interactions that play in the fair or unfair use of the covering dynamics that play in name writing, and that could also be perturbated by a third party, let's say city workers, municipality, some organizer of festival, or of course private with an E, company like real estate agency having the idea to gentrify the neighborhood and so on and so on, and also that might reset this process of covering up, of getting up with the name, with the style, by censoring, buffing, or destroying the painting. So, urban repeint, urban retouching proceeds differently depending on the position of the author. If you think about this wall as something that is all the time painted over and, so to say, retouched in the manner of repeint, like this idea of having somebody painting and changing something in the paintings that existed. Here, it depends on the position of the author. Like the graffiti perception, writer and artist are retouching in the name of the game. That's how they play, you know, the name. So the game, is it like the fame game, or is it the art game? Is it, yeah, you know. Politics perception, activists or a city or the city are retouching in the name of powers. This is the idea of bringing a narrative to the city and using the power of the gray, the power of the gray, or the power of the black, you know, to change the way people acknowledge the expression of power in the city. And finally, the social perception, let's say the citizen, which are retouching in the name of the affects, like for example, there is a swastika in public space and you're a citizen and you don't feel comfortable having swastika in public space, so you will retouch it. But of course, you're also a teenager and you're in love with this girl or this boy and you go under like a Cyrano de Bergerac style, you do the I love you, whoever, Suzanne. Okay, so I will advocate for three types of repeints that are specifically related to the urban landscape context, and of course this is perfectible. It's just like I try to make a synthesis for this lecture. I'm still proceeding the reflection. Maybe the paper will be perfect. So repeint de control, control retouching. So it's about deciding how the urban landscape should look and maintain its conceptual aesthetics. That's, of course, everything that we call buff, but it could be also something. It could be, for example, the situation with Esif that painted a mural in Saint-Malo and he collected some graffiti and put it around some kind of big fish with some text on the corner, and the municipality that didn't want him to collect the graffiti and inscribe it on the wall came and removed the graffiti, while they didn't remove the graffiti that he collected in the streets. It was a very odd situation. So it was about control the narrative, you know. Repin de jeu, playful retouching, interacting in the frame of the common and informal rules of graphic intervention fields. Of course, because if you do some slogan and you can go over some writing, because it's not the same game. Of course, the writers will say, "Oh, you shouldn't do this," but anarchists don't care, activists don't care. The moral aspect, the ideological aspect of the practice is a game in itself. It's a game with the politics. It's a game with the police also. It's a game with the population, with the narrative that leads the society. And if you're pasting posters, it's the same. Like normally, you shouldn't consider that people that cover graffiti with posters are not respecting graffiti, because, of course, when it will rain, the poster will go away, and it will even permit the graffiti to be more conserved. And for the graffiti, you're all familiar with this fair use of rules. And finally, what I call for now, repeint émotionnel, maybe affective repaint, I don't know, emotional retouching. So embodying an affected perception. For me, it will be very large, and I will show you how I can exemplify in the 5 minutes I have left those kind of examples. So first, let's speak about control. I've been invited to be a jury and expert in the production of a giant mural in Rennes on this wall, and my concern when I saw the call was this 3 meters beige layer full of tags. The spot that I know well because I didn't paint on it, but I was like all the writers in the end of the 90s, beginning of 2000 in Rennes. And this is a 20 years old spot, and not so interesting spot, but always painted and painted. So you see, I go back to 2008, it was painted and painted and painted. And at the end, the muralist who was selected was a guy called War, and known for doing cute animals in public space, and recently some different stuff like, trees and flowers. That was actually the only one of the few, but kind of the only painting for me that makes sense to do here. Because I don't know, I didn't have time to interrogate War, but I thought it was a very smart way to play with this area of graffiti spot, you know, because it's a tree and none of the graffiti will succeed to cover up all the murals, so it can interact with the tree. And of course, that's what happened a few days after it was painting. Somebody came and sprayed some big fat Montana, like, you know, the super hardcore cans. And at the end, because War wanted it to be like, let's say, fair with municipality and inhabitants which participated in the process, he painted over the wall. But yeah, okay, repeint control, you get it, control teaching. So game then. Graffiti game, basically. Here we have a Dan 23 mural, and you can see that it has been sprayed over by a Vaughan crew with a line. Why has it been painted over? It's because the guy, Dan 23, drew some kids with a balloon written "Stop École" and painted over this chrome from Vaughan crew, from Idéfix and Éclair, that you can see has been actually slightly retouched, this one. And so we have two retouchings that are related to the graffiti game. So yeah, it's classical one. And then this one, which is playing with another context, it's Idéfix and Datura who painted over a commissioned mural of Daniel Buren. I won't comment so much because I have 2 minutes. But what is interesting is this Soleil Garde of Corps was from 1995, and I'm almost convinced that the fact that the painting make the piece of Buren more visible than it ever was, or that it wasn't anymore because it was fading. And of course, I find it also interesting because if you think of Daniel Buren in 1968, he was posting posters in the streets, where in France people were addressing social issues as collective by posting posters in the streets, and at the same time in the US it was name-writing graffiti. So we have kind of the confrontation of two visual tools, like what is his corner concept. And I think both are very efficient to analyze public space. I won't go further with this one. Finally, emotional repeint. Oh, 2 minutes. Why? How much time? 5 minutes. Ah, that's so cute. So emotional repeint. Okay, so this look like the graffiti frame, because you can see in the center Olaf from Von Crew covered back some piece that happened to cover a piece by In Excess SDK, and you can read on the bottom, touche pas aux anciens, don't touch the olders, the old schools, okay, the ancient. Why is Olaf covering a piece? Because like the game of the graffiti was respected. You know, the guy who covered the Inx's piece covered it perfectly, and you can even tell, because you can see a bit by transparency, that the piece laying under it is like clean. But the fact is, In Excess is somebody, and that's why I'm speaking about emotion or affects here. You have to know that In Excess is actually the author of the mythical Dirty Hands video of graffiti from the 90s, 3 volumes, and actually those 3 volumes, one of the 3 volumes, what actually is diploma project at the art school, which is crazy if you think about it, that in the 90s an art school validated a project of like hardcore bombing trains with a mix, like sound music, DJ mix on the background. It's crazy. It's very good. I want to find the jury that validated this diploma and interview them, because I think it's very interesting to of course have the feedback, and of course I will ask him. So for me, the emotional aspect of the retouching here is addressing that it's not about just the ancient, but it's also this person who was a key in the graffiti movement of the 90s, because he participated to bring, let's say, a European Parisian imaginary to the scene. And another one, which is like let's say less powerful, because I don't know actually the local scene, but I find it very interesting. It's a photograph called Loref that you see here, maybe here in action. He's documenting graffiti around the scene of the south of France, and he decided to restore 2 pieces of Nimea and Fasque, and in the exact style it was done before. So you can see it's like, but he's doing it, I don't think is I don't know actually, maybe it's him. But what I find very interesting is like we are going back to the problematics that are actually concerning the tradition of repeint, like the technical restoration, but the reason it's meant to be, it's not meant to be in the graffiti, let's say, habits, but the fact that it happened, it really tells something about the person, that the affective relationship to the territory, and the way the history should be transmitted to the next generation. And so I will, like, it will be my last example before the opening. I will go, unfortunately, very fast on this, but still like 2 or 3 minutes. So in 20th June of 2019, there was in Nantes K. Wilson, a free party. There is one event called Fête de la Musique, maybe you know about it, like for the spring. It was introduced by Jacques Lang in the 80s. And everybody is allowed to play music in public space. So of course in Nantes, which is really like close to Bretagne, and big scene of free parties, there is a free party. It's a big tradition, but of course police is super violent, because there is also a strong political activist scene there. And police came on K. Wilson without like some strategy, and some people fall down in the river, the police violence. And one of these people was missing and died. They find his body, Steve Maya Canico. What happened then, of course, is anonymous claiming for justice by a lot of people with very various graphic intervention, various collective around it. We can see 2 or 3 of them. Some were happening around the fountain, where people were putting some posters. Some, of course, were doing it through demonstration. It's a case of Nantes Révolté Collective, which is like a critical media from Britain about especially the situation in Nantes. You heard somehow a lot about those guys because they diffuse the information about Notre-Dame-des-Landes and all the confrontation and police violence in this frame. And so one of the writers, part of the group, made a tribute mural, What is the Police Doing? Justice for Steve, using Steve as a kind of icon of this police violence situation of Kay Wilson and against Free Party. And of course it was painted on the Maison du Port, which I will come in a few minutes to, on the Kay Wilson, so it's site-specific mural. But this mural regularly was covered by fascist graffiti. You can see the good sign, this kind of cible, target here, which is like extreme right symbol, and it was like painted over and painted over, restored. At some point, it was painted all over in black after 2 years by Plus de Couleur, which is a collective of a writer who organized events around muralism, and Just Steve, which is a collective about the memory of Steve. And the fact that it really brought rage to Nantes Révoltée because they thought it was a censorship act. In fact, that's why I came to this emotional repeint, retouching. In fact, the family was fed up to have the face of their son to be the martyr of police violence, and also in the middle of Antifa fascist conflict all the time on the news, and with like some very hard words over the face or the body of their son. And that's why they have this discussion with Plus de Couleur in order like to make a proper mural for Steve and separate Steve from the narratives that Nantes Révoltée used to defend. Like they make it a martyr of anti-fascist, but he was like some kind of babos guy working in animation with kids. He wasn't an Antifa. So this is the emotional part. Now, this is also the part, so it was a big debate, and I know personally Plus de Couleur, and I follow Nantes Révoltée, and Nantes Révoltée was like a bad face, you know, the way they did it, because actually this place, the reason the mural actually happened is because in 2012, Plus de Couleur negotiated the mural in order it could be painted, so they made a program like 2012, 2014, 2017, and at the end, they just enter the place, and it's their HQ now. So the question was also, okay, guys, you want to make this mural, but you want it to be permanent and so on. You're pissed that we paint over, but you know we also have a job to support the community of writers and permit some people to express in public space. So of course, then a programmation continues with James Baldwin, but Lafleuge and other stuff. And of course, Plus de Couleur is using the wall to make initiation, a workshop about graffiti and painting. And they made this mural like just to Steve, like without the police violence, so it doesn't get defaced because of the political aspect that took part in the narrative. And also, so the big discussion was all about how conserving memories, and that will be almost conserving the memory. In graffiti scene, the way you pay a tribute to somebody who's dead, you know about it. You do this kind of RIP mural. This is like 2 paintings done by the graffiti scene when Drop, a young writer, died in 2010. And people started to paint over the city and make a lot of peace in public space. And also the way you want to maintain the memory of somebody when it comes to graffiti culture, when it's come to muralism, is in fact not by having it forever, but reenacting the gesture again and again and again, and it's a different manner. This is a processual beauty I was speaking about, that for me, Nantes Révoltée didn't get so much because they paid more about their ideological way of seeing things instead of considering also the social aspect of the practice. So, to conclude, pentimento, what is this? Like it's a pentimento mess, somebody like tried to play the fair use of graffiti and started a throw up but failed to finish it, and you cannot read it, and it's staying like in this in-between state. What is pentimento? Pentimento is this idea of early image forms that have been changed and painted over, that you can almost recognized and usually is made by the real author of the painting. It's not like a repeint. It's when you come over your own painting and change something in it. Here, like you got this ghost face of a woman you can see in this painting, for example, and this kind of surviving image that pops up. So the question from shifting for me to repeint, like retouching, to repentance, repentir, so pentimento, is to address the processual beauty of muralism and to understand that muralism is finally something that, like the transformation of urban landscape is a collective responsibility that somehow could be considered to be created by a collective author. Like the whole is a common. And what we are looking at is always this chain of interaction that makes each people depend to each other to produce some kind of visual. And so I will conclude by my type of action. Here you got a black dot mural painted by Benjamin Lading in 2011, defaced in my street. So I decided to perform a wrong restoration to try to maintain this in-between stage and push further the way we look at urban landscape, like address this pentimento aspect. Like I play as an artist over other artists' work with the agreement of the artist in order to produce a new visual because the originate mural was over. And so the idea was just to restore it in red, of course, black and red dot. And then another layer is coming. You know, the city workers are coming back. And this. So here we are still again in this pentimento state, like this kind of restoration. You can see the layers. And I'm gonna come with another color, but what is really interesting is that's exactly the expression how you can see that the state of this muralism is a collective negotiation. You know, you got the workers, you got the taggers, you got me, and you got Benjamin Lading. And the last one to finish. Freedom mural from here, defaced by taggers that are pissed that all the walls are covered with murals now. I can understand them a bit. And now I made this kind of buff, like, you know, when the workers are doing these shapes, but of course in a kintsugi style with golden over the painting. And so it's still, for me, it's still the same like this one. It's like, it's in between. Nobody gonna restore the original painting. The NGO organizing the festival doesn't have the means. They prefer to paint over and do something new. And so at some point, and the tagger won't cover because they will disrespect here. The only tagger who could cover it will be Voraz Technosif. Yeah. Thank you for listening.
Well, okay, thank you very much, all of you. We came to the conclusion of the conference, but it's time for the last Q&A. So maybe if any of you has any questions for the lecturers of the last panel. Yes.
Could the panel maybe sit at the front so we could? I mean, I've kind of got a question, comment for you two. At least, if not three.
Okay, yes, please.
People. That would be really cool. Because I thought that panel really, to those who programmed the conference, I thought that panel fitted together really well. Really well, like intersecting notes and ideas and stuff. So, thank you to all of you for your talks. Vernon's talk got me starting to think about, I guess, the distinction between memory and nostalgia. And then when you started talking and you were talking about, you know, sort of reasons for restoration or, you know, sort of the emotional restoration versus, you know, I mean, think about the kind of interventions you were talking about and the kinds of murals you were presenting. I mean, you were talking about murals that were produced in the 90s to commemorate a war that young people don't directly remember. So it's a passed down memory on a wall. I remember going to Łódź in Poland a few years back, and there's these old communist murals on the walls there, and they really divide people who live there in terms of, you know, like the older people are like, we don't want these, we don't like these, they remind us of bad things. But the younger people have this kind of nostalgic view of them, yeah. So it's kind of what to do with these walls that people disagree on. So they actually they got artists to work with the murals that were there, so that they were still partially visible, so you could sort of see the palimpsest, what is the word you use? It begins with a P, and I wrote it down. Sentimental. So it kind of rejigged that memory so that it served both of those parties. So I guess, I don't know, I want you two to kind of talk about the nexus there between these different forms of restoration and memory and affect, please.
Well, a lot of these murals are actually quite new. I mean, there were a few from the 90s that were talking about Croatia, from the 90s but the war in the 90s, and now there's a new explosion. So what you were saying was definitely the young people who haven't experienced the war are painting these dominant narrative murals, which so they're not the veterans that are painting the walls. There were a lot of monuments that were from the Second World War, and these anti-fascist monuments. And there was a huge destruction of those and graffiti interventions on those monuments. So in a way, the nostalgia would probably be for that Yugo nostalgia for the Second World War, anti-fascism, Tito's Yugoslavia, and so on. But that isn't so represented in murals. Now, it'd be actually interesting to see if in Slovenia there are some NOB partisan murals. I mean, they're actually quite rare. Really, the last one, that Rosanda, was really a rare example of, let's say, anti-fascist. So they're pretty rare in that sort of nostalgia. But I like the idea. So the nostalgia hasn't quite gotten to the mural phase unless we're talking about the 1990s.
Okay, so I will reply with some practical example of how I will figure the thing. In 2008, with my colleague David, we were in residency in Leblon, like a big social housing neighborhood. And of course, in this neighborhood, you can see a lot of graffiti murals that are like identifying some youth, like the collective of this and this, and you know. And we feel it a bit unfair that all the local youngsters that made graffiti with shitty markers were erased and covered by this beautiful graffiti made by adults. And so what we did, because we saw some of these tags over the painting, which actually is not respecting the rules of graffiti, and so we decided to integrate it to the mural by changing the colors and having like the two layers of discourse becoming one entire thing. And I could imagine a new stakes for muralism programmation that will actually be the fact of having intervention over these existing nostalgic murals and having a new meaning, like update by some other like collective or artist. It will be very interesting, like to be able to have a comment which is actually will be a visual act on this mural, so like confront the memory and nostalgia in an art gesture. I think it will be very interesting because we are coming, like not yet, but let's speak in 5-10 years, and there will be all this city with all these murals that will all be destroyed by some writers by the time because the paint was shitty, because they made some work around the building and some part of it is covered with garbage, dust, whatever. And so what will we do with all this visual material? How will we consider it? Will we paint it over again that like it never existed? Or can we maybe change the way we look at it and stop having this fetish conservative prisma that existed in contemporary art and I think shouldn't exist in graffiti and street art culture?
Can I just comment something else? In the murals, there wasn't the nostalgia, but now thinking, I didn't really present it, but there's the political messages. That's a huge war throughout Croatia, and probably also other parts of former Yugoslavia. For example, they'd write Tito heroj, like Tito the hero, in red, and then someone came, crossed it out, and wrote Tito bandito, with black. So there's definitely that kind of war going on. It was great, actually, your presentation, because I lack sort of the technical terms and these structures and the practices on the street, but I think it's really great in applying to also the political graffiti that I'm looking at, not just the tagging and art that you have presented.
Actually, I was this talk came after thinking about like the redacted graffiti and all these dynamics that already exist on this type of interaction, and it made me think to something else, because you speak about those old fresco in France. That one of the starting point of my practice with David as Les Frères Ripoulin was the fact that we realized that people were having nostalgia with this old giant commercial murals that we have in France from the Ripollinization period, and they were more paying attention and saying that this wall were sacred, like the people were relying to this wall, which were advertising, you know, with good designer, but advertising, more relying than the nowadays graffiti that was done without, of course, consent or authorization, but also for free. And we wanted to create a visual language which has in between these murals and the graffiti type of action. And I think this is exactly what we have to push forward. I mean, in terms of programmation also, not only like the artist should do it, but I think the organization should find new frame of action.
Yes, of course. Maybe it would be the best if you come here so she can hear you in person.
I'm sitting on all the things. Sorry, I just don't want to forget that Maria's there because I remember the lonely days of Zoom. Hey, Maria. Thank you for playing that video. That was like super helpful. I think the question in your case kind of extends to the reconfiguring of place and memory, and I guess contesting a negative memory of place and rewriting that or reworking that. Is that something you could kind of speak to, please? Maybe.
I would love Aka to answer this, obviously, but from my perspective, I would say that maybe today it's not about reconfiguring the negative memory. It's more often about having it actually present, because, I mean, this is a very long story, but I guess many of you know, I mean, Colombia has a history of around 600,000 disappeared people, displaced people from the neighborhoods to other parts of the country, the city, so on. So I in terms of art and what they do, I think it is more about maintaining those stories present, trying to have them present, to represent them in some way that would not actually put their own lives in threat. Because this is another question. I mean, many of these people have themselves been displaced or threatened also because of the social leadership that they hold, because of the investigations that they do on their own as well, the ones that the state is not interested in unraveling. So, yeah, I wouldn't say it's reconfiguring. It's about maintaining those stories, that memory present, and not allowing that this popularized, very much promoted new narrative of the city doesn't just wipe everything earlier away. Yeah, I think it's more about that, and to do it in a more or less subtle way. No.
Thank you.
Maybe okay. Maybe any other questions from the audience? If not, maybe just a small practical question for you, Maria. Since you have a gallery that we saw at the cemetery, I'm just wondering, are people taking care of this planned gallery, or is it the plan that the gallery will soon become a forest?
So this is actually the area of the cemetery where the gallery is inside. It's actually private land, but as it has been pretty much appropriated by the local community, then it's them who take care of it. The plants they have put there, also the paintings. So it's kind of the common voice that is taking care of it. until now. But it's also in fear of disappearing because of the real estate pressure now on that area, because it's right on the route towards the tourist area, let's say. So it's it's being threatened by being wiped off as well, because it's not in a list of heritage, architectural heritage or something, which is something that Arta is trying to achieve as well. So yeah, for the moment, it's a grassroots initiative, but they will see how they can maintain it. Yeah.
Okay, I think Sandy has one question as well. Do you have for Maria?
I just have a general comment and a shameless promotion of other events, and maybe in also what Maria was saying. So during the festival, actually as of Sunday, we are planning to restore another mural. So Matthew is taking care of that. Again, this mural is a legendary mural from the late 80s that was done by Jožeslav Joka, painter, and it was actually the first time that this kind of mural appeared, this was one of the first aesthetic murals in Ljubljana, and it's not protected, of course, as any kind of heritage, cultural and so on. And we managed, or hopefully will manage to do this negative restoration also by the help and the hand of Matthew. So not just the theoretical part, but also the practical. So I'll just take this opportunity to invite everybody that is here present, and also the audience that might be checking us on YouTube, to be present at the opening on Sunday at 8. So just that.
Thank you, Sandy. I was just planning on asking Mathieu, what are you going to do in your action on Sunday? Maybe if you can tell us a little bit yourself.
Yeah, so it's a mural over Sax Pub. So it's black people playing music and some fancy, extraordinary dogs and animals and bizarre stuff with a landscape. And of course, the mural vanished, and some parts are destroyed, now that are repaired with concrete and so on. And the main idea was I wanted to do this gesture for a very long time, like working on existing mural. I wanted to invert all the colors of a mural, because now that we have this device in the pocket that is both taking pictures and permitting to edit it, it's like all the chain of production of documentation change. In the 90s, you will have the negative film, then you have to go to the shop and have the paper version of the photo and so on. So if you use these tools, you know how difficult it is to process all this style of documentation, and of course documentation is a big thing in graffiti. And so, yes, I wanted to experiment this negative restoration, and of course with this type of mural, which is actually not linked to graffiti directly because it's not name writing, it's just a background and characters. It becomes more and more interesting. Also because with Instagram filter, you will be able to consult the original mural, but you won't be able to see it for real. And I really like the fact that instead of taking classic picture, people will have to do this special trick to actually access to the old mural through their device. So it's playing with the memory also and how we transmit it.
I'm sorry, Vieran, you wanted to ask
I have also had a question, or maybe just a comment about thank you for the very fascinating talk about Medellin and the issues there. And I mean, I don't know if you saw, I was speaking about Tucson earlier in Arizona, and clearly it seems like there's issues of gentrification and class in terms of the renewal of the city, but at what cost? And Tucson didn't have mass graves, as far as I know, when they were tearing down some of these old neighborhoods. But I thought it was a very interesting example. But what I was also inspired by your presentation in the film, and what you just said, is that the murals and the street art is sort of preserving the memory of those who are basically forgotten. And the problem in Croatia and some of these other former Yugoslav states with the war legacy is that the production of the murals are supporting the dominant narrative. It's what the nationalists are already saying, and then you have the next generation parroting that. They're not actually addressing the taboo topics, whether it's in Croatia, Serb civilian victims or other things that happen in Bosnia-Herzegovina that aren't talked about, but in fact, the street art is reproducing the dominant narratives and even burying the marginalized people even more. So I guess it's not really a question, but just kind of riffing off of it to think about things. Why is street art sometimes a voice for the forgotten, and other times just is a loud, drowning out the voice of the forgotten and being manipulated and used by regimes and states.
Can I give my comment as well?
Of course.
Yeah, no, absolutely, I do agree. But just to emphasize again, I think in a rather small territory, say in about 2 square kilometers, there are 2 rather separate spaces, right? So there is the cemetery, which is if you're not from around there, then you wouldn't really know how to enter, or perhaps it's even closed. And there you do have these murals, so there would be faces of young boys who've been assassinated, or other people whose bodies haven't been found. And these are places where people actually go and do their rituals as well. So I think I would like to think that allows people to maintain those memories and not really contribute to that super progressive neoliberal city narrative. Whilst if you go up to the regeneration, the tourist corridor, right, then you find plenty of graffitis that literally write out and say transformation and maybe even depict the metro cable and all these cool infrastructure things that have been done in the last decade or 2. So I think we should really analyze piece by piece and space by space. Let's put it that way. Yeah.
Okay. Maria, thank you very much, and thank both of you as well. Since it's a little bit after 3 o'clock, I think we can still take a lunch break finally. And of course, we would like to invite you all also to the evening events at 7 p.m. You're welcome to come to Alcatraz Gallery at Metelkova. Epos, Epos, the guy that you could not really see, but more likely hear yesterday, is having an exhibition opening there. And the exhibition is called Artist Work Challenge, Working Residency at Asylum Studio. And then at 9 o'clock at parking lot at Metelkova Health Center on Metelkova Street, Danilo Milovanovic will do a wall intervention called Untitled. So we can you can just relax and be ready for a surprise. And you're all very welcome to come at 7 o'clock to Metelkova. Thank you very much. We're concluding this conference for this year and coming back again next year on the 5th International Ljubljana Street Art Festival. Right, Sandy? Yes. Okay, so thank you very much all for coming, and of course thank you Kino Šiška for having us here. See you in the evening. Goodbye.